I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. Thank you for watching. The call came at 2:13 a.m. I fumbled for my phone in the dark, my heart racing before I even answered. Nobody calls at that hour with good news. Is this Barbara Stewart? The voice was professional, clinical. Yes, I replied, already reaching for the lamp. Who is this Dr. Emma Chen from Northwestern Memorial in Chicago? I'm calling about your son, Michael Stewart. You're listed as his emergency contact. My blood turned to ice. Michael, my only child. The son I'd raised alone after his father died in Afghanistan when Michael was just 8. The brilliant architect who'd moved to Chicago 5 years ago for his dream job. What happened? Is he okay? I was already out of bed, mentally cataloging what I would need to pack. Mrs. Stewart, your son is in critical condition. His kidneys are failing. He was brought in unconscious by a neighbor who found him collapsed in the hallway of his apartment building. I think you should come as soon as possible. The doctor's voice softened slightly. We've been trying to reach his wife, Vanessa, but haven't had any success. Of course they hadn't. In the 3 years since Michael married Vanessa, I'd learned to expect her absence during any crisis. But this wasn't a missed birthday call or a holiday where she'd dragged Michael to some exotic location rather than visiting me in San Diego. This was my son's life. I'll be on the first flight, I told Dr. Chen, and ended the call. My hands shook as I booked the earliest flight to Chicago, packed a small suitcase, and called a taxi. 35 years as a military nurse had taught me to function under pressure, to compartmentalize emotions until the crisis passed. Those skills kicked in now, carrying me through the motions while my mind raced with questions. Why hadn't Michael told me he was sick? We spoke every Sunday. Just last weekend he had sounded tired, but insisted it was just work stress from a big project. And where was Vanessa? The sleek, sophisticated woman who'd swept my son off his feet had always struck me as calculating. But surely even she wouldn't abandon her husband during a medical emergency. The red-eye flight from San Diego to Chicago was a blur of recycled air and anxious thoughts. I stared out the window at the darkness below, remembering Michael as a child, his serious little face as he built elaborate structures with blocks, his teenage determination to become an architect like his father had been, his proud smile when he graduated summa cum laude from Cornell. I'd missed too many of those moments. My nursing career had taken me to military hospitals across the world, from Germany to Japan to Afghanistan. I'd saved countless lives while sometimes failing to be present for my own son's milestones. Michael had never complained, had always said he was proud of my service, but the guilt gnawed at me nonetheless. Dawn was breaking over Lake Michigan as my plane landed at O'Hare. I grabbed my carry-on and was one of the first passengers off, hurrying through the terminal with a single-minded focus. The hospital was a 30-minute taxi ride away, each second stretching painfully as we crawled through early morning traffic. Northwestern Memorial loomed like a fortress of glass and steel against the Chicago skyline. I straightened my shoulders as I entered, falling back on the authoritative posture that had served me well through decades of military service. At 60, I was still fit and strong, my silver hair cut in a practical bob that required minimal maintenance. I didn't look like someone to be dismissed or pitied, and I needed that strength now. I'm Barbara Stewart, I told the receptionist at the ICU desk. I'm here for my son, Michael Stewart. Her eyes softened with recognition. Dr. Chen has been waiting for you. I'll let her know you're here. Minutes later, a petite woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a lab coat approached. Mrs. Stewart, I'm Emma Chen. She extended her hand. Thank you for coming so quickly. How is he? I asked, skipping pleasantries. Stable for now, but critical. Dr. Chen replied, leading me down a corridor of beeping monitors and hushed voices. Michael is in end-stage renal failure. From his medical records, it appears he was diagnosed with IgA nephropathy 6 months ago, but he hasn't been following the prescribed treatment regimen or attending follow-up appointments. I stopped walking. 6 months. That's impossible. He would have told me. Dr. Chen's expression was carefully neutral. Sometimes patients don't want to worry their families, or perhaps he thought he could manage it on his own. That sounded like Michael, always determined to handle problems independently, never wanting to be a burden. But this wasn't a difficult project or a tight deadline. This was his life. What treatment should he have been receiving? I asked. Medication to control blood pressure and reduce protein in his urine, dietary restrictions, regular monitoring. Dr. Chen hesitated. The disease progressed unusually quickly. We're running tests to determine if there were other factors involved. We stopped outside a room with a sliding glass door. Through it, I could see a figure in the bed, surrounded by machines. My son, but not as I knew him. Michael's once robust frame looked shrunken beneath the hospital blanket. His skin had a grayish cast, and his cheeks were hollow. IVs snaked from his arms, and a dialysis machine hummed beside the bed. "He's been asking for you," Dr. Chen said softly. "He regains consciousness periodically. The dialysis helps temporarily, but—" She didn't need to finish. I understood kidney failure all too well from my nursing career. Without proper treatment, or a transplant, my son was dying. I took a deep breath and entered the room. The familiar antiseptic smell and rhythmic beeping of monitors transported me back to my years of service. But this was drastically different. This wasn't a nameless patient. This was my Michael. I approached the bed and gently took his hand. His fingers were swollen, his wedding band cutting into the flesh. I carefully slid it off and placed it on the bedside table. "Michael," I said softly. "It's Mom. I'm here now." His eyelids fluttered, then opened. Recognition dawned slowly in his hazel eyes, his father's eyes. "Mom." His voice was a dry rasp. "You came." "Of course I came." I squeezed his hand, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Why didn't you tell me you were sick?" "Sweetheart." He closed his eyes briefly. "Didn't want to worry you." Vanessa said, "We could handle it." Anger flashed through me at the mention of my daughter-in-law, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't the time. "Where is Vanessa now?" I asked as neutrally as possible. Michael's face clouded with confusion. "Business trip, I don't remember. She's been busy lately." His eyes drifted shut again, the brief conversation exhausting him. I sat beside him, holding his hand as he slipped back into unconsciousness. A nurse entered, a young man with kind eyes and efficient movements. "I'm James," he said, checking Michael's IV and vitals. "You must be Mrs. Stewart. We've been hoping you'd arrive soon." "Has my daughter-in-law been in at all?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. James hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I've been on shift for the past 3 days. She hasn't been in during that time. And before that," he adjusted a monitor, avoiding my gaze. I really couldn't say. "James," my voice took on the authoritative tone I'd used with new recruits. "My son is dying. I need to know what's going on." He sighed, then spoke in a lowered voice. "She came in once, the day he was admitted. Stayed about 20 minutes. She told us she had important meetings she couldn't miss. Said she'd be checking in by phone." He glanced at Michael's unconscious form. "She hasn't called the nursing station once." The anger I'd been suppressing flared hot and bright. I'd never warmed to Vanessa. With her designer clothes and dismissive attitude toward my quaint military career. But I'd kept my feelings to myself for Michael's sake. He'd been so happy, so enamored with her sophistication and beauty. What had seemed like confidence to him had always read as coldness to me. "Thank you for being honest," I told James. "I'll be staying with my son now. I'd like to speak with Dr. Chen again when she's available." For the next several hours, I sat at Michael's bedside, studying his medical chart when he slept, and talking softly to him during his brief periods of consciousness. The picture that emerged was alarming. Michael's kidney disease had been diagnosed early enough that proper treatment should have slowed its progression. Instead, it had accelerated rapidly, as if he'd received no treatment at all. When Dr. Chen returned in the afternoon, I met her in the hallway outside Michael's room. "His prescriptions," I said without preamble. "Were they filled regularly?" Dr. B. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's one of the things we're investigating. Records show the prescriptions were filled, but you don't think he was taking them," I finished. "Blood tests suggest inconsistent medication levels," she confirmed. "Mrs. Stewart, I understand your concern, but I should caution you against jumping to conclusions. Many factors could be involved. I appreciate your discretion, doctor, I replied, but I've been a nurse for 35 years, including 10 in nephrology. I know what I'm seeing. Her professional reserve softened slightly. I didn't realize. In that case, you understand the situation better than most. We're doing everything we can for your son, but his prognosis is serious. He needs a transplant, ideally from a living donor. Test me, I said immediately. I'm his mother. There's a chance I could be compatible. We can certainly do that. Dr. Chen agreed. But first we need to stabilize him and, she hesitated, and determine if there was negligence involved in his care. I finished for her. I understand. I'll be staying at his apartment while I'm in Chicago. I'd like to check for his medications there. Dr. Chen nodded. That would be helpful. We've been trying to reach his wife to authorize release of his complete medical records from his nephrologist. If you have his house keys, I do. I lied. In fact, I had no key to Michael's apartment, but I wasn't about to let that stop me. After ensuring Michael was stable and promising to return in a few hours, I took a taxi to his address in Chicago's upscale Gold Coast neighborhood. The sleek high-rise with its uniformed doorman and marble lobby reflected Vanessa's taste more than my son's. Michael had always preferred the character of older buildings, but he'd wanted to make his wife happy. The doorman recognized Michael's name immediately. Mrs. Stewart, we've been so worried about Mr. Stewart. Is he doing better? He's still in serious condition, I said. I need to get into his apartment to collect some things for him, but I don't have a key. I'm his mother. The doorman, his nameplate read Thomas, looked uncomfortable. I'm not supposed to... There are procedures. I met his eyes directly. My son is in the ICU with kidney failure. I need to check his medication. Surely there's a building manager or someone who can help in an emergency. Thomas's resolve wavered. Let me call Mr. Rodriguez. He's the building manager. If you have ID... 20 minutes later, after showing my driver's license and military ID, I was escorted to Michael's 14th floor apartment by a sympathetic Mr. Rodriguez. Such a nice young man, he said as he unlocked the door. Always has a good word for everyone. Not like... He caught himself. I mean, we're all very concerned. The apartment, when revealed, was both familiar and strange. I recognized Michael's architectural books on the shelves, his collection of vintage blueprints framed on one wall. But the sleek, minimalist furniture and cold color scheme felt impersonal, like a showroom rather than a home. More alarming was the state of disarray. The kitchen sink was piled with unwashed dishes. Mail had accumulated on the counter in stacks. A fine layer of dust covered the surfaces, suggesting the cleaning service Michael had mentioned in our calls hadn't been coming. I'll leave you to it, Mr. Rodriguez said. Just call the front desk when you're finished, and someone will escort you out. Once alone, I began my search. In the bathroom, I found what I was looking for. Prescription bottles in Michael's name, lisinopril for blood pressure, prednisone for inflammation, specific medications for IgA nephropathy. All had been filled, as Dr. Chen had said. But something was wrong. The lisinopril bottle, filled 2 months ago with a 30-day supply, should have been empty if Michael had been taking it as prescribed. Instead, it was nearly full. The same was true of his other medications. My stomach clenched as I began to understand. Michael hadn't been taking his medication, or perhaps hadn't known he needed to. But who would fill prescriptions and then not ensure they were taken in the bedroom? The king-sized bed was unmade on one side, Michael's side, judging by the architectural magazine on the nightstand. The other side was pristine, as if it hadn't been slept in recently. The closet told another story. Michael's clothes hung neatly on one side, while Vanessa's section was in disarray, designer dresses and shoes scattered as if someone had hurriedly packed. On the dresser, something caught my eye, a framed photo of Michael and Vanessa on their wedding day. They looked radiantly happy, my son gazing adoringly at his beautiful bride. I remembered that day, how I'd pushed aside my reservations about Vanessa's coldness toward me, focusing instead on Michael's happiness. Next to the photo lay a man's watch, an expensive one I recognized as the gift I'd sent Michael for his 30th birthday 2 years ago. It had stopped, the battery apparently dead. Another small sign of neglect. In Michael's home office, I found more troubling evidence. Medical bills with past due notices, letters from insurance companies questioning claims, a notebook in Michael's precise handwriting tracking his symptoms, fatigue, nausea, swelling, dating back 9 months. One entry from 4 months ago read, "Vanessa says the specialist is too expensive. Going to try dietary changes first. She's researching alternative treatments." Another, from 2 months ago, "Feeling worse. V insists natural supplements will kick in soon. Too tired to argue." The most recent entry, dated just a week ago. "Something's very wrong. Can't reach V. Left message with her assistant. Need to call Mom." He had tried to call me, but no call had come. Had he been too sick to follow through, or had someone prevented him from reaching out? I sank into Michael's desk chair, the evidence mounting into an ugly picture. My son had been seriously ill, possibly neglected, while his wife were certainly not caring for her husband. A sound at the front door startled me from my thoughts. Keys jingling, then the door opening. I stood, adrenaline coursing through me as I moved toward the entrance. A woman entered, tall, slender, expensively dressed in a black cocktail dress that had definitely not come from a hospital vigil. Her dark hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. When she saw me, she froze, her red-painted lips parting in surprise. "Barbara," Vanessa said, quickly composing her features into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What an unexpected surprise. When did you get in?" "This morning," I replied, studying her closely. No signs of worry or grief. No indication she'd spent any time at a hospital. She smelled of expensive perfume and, faintly, of alcohol. "Directly from the airport to the hospital to see my critically ill son. Your husband." Her smile faltered slightly. "Yes, it's been so difficult. I was just at a fundraiser for kidneys research. Actually, networking with specialists who might help Michael." She set down her designer clutch and removed her stiletto heels. "How is he any improvement?" The casual way she asked, as if inquiring about a mild cold rather than end-stage kidney failure, confirmed my worst suspicions. "He's dying, Vanessa." I kept my voice level with effort. "Where have you been? The hospital says you haven't visited in days." "That's not true," she protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. "I've been in and out. They must have missed me. And I've been working so hard to research treatments, make arrangements. While wearing that dress," I gestured to her cocktail attire, "Michael has been asking for you. He thinks you're on a business trip. The nurses say you haven't called once." Anger flashed across her face, quickly masked. "I don't have to justify myself to you. This is between Michael and me. You've barely been present in his life for years, flying around with the military, and now you swoop in to judge me." The accusation stung because it held a grain of truth, but I didn't let it deter me. His medications haven't been taken. His medical appointments were missed. He needed treatment. Vanessa, why wasn't he getting it? She walked to the kitchen, putting distance between us, and poured herself a glass of water. Her hand was steady, unconcerned. "Michael is a grown man who makes his own decisions. If he chose not to follow some doctor's excessive treatment plan, that's his right. Those medications have terrible side effects. We were trying more natural approaches." "Natural approaches don't cure kidney disease," I said, my nurse's training boiling up. "And from his journal, it sounds like you were the one making those decisions, not Michael." Vanessa's facade cracked slightly. "You went through his things. You had no right. This is my home." "It's my son's home," I corrected. "And he's in the ICU while you're attending fundraisers in cocktail dresses at midnight. Where have you really been? Vanessa, and where were you when he collapsed in the hallway and a neighbor had to call an ambulance?" She set the glass down with a sharp click. "I don't have to listen to this. I think you should leave." "I'm not going anywhere," I replied calmly. "Michael needs someone who actually cares about his welfare, and clearly that's not you." For a moment, I thought she might physically attack me. Then, with visible effort, she regained her composure. "Fine. Stay if you want. I'm going to shower and change. Then head to the hospital." She moved toward the bedroom, then paused. "Don't get too comfortable. Barbara, you're not welcome here. As soon as Michael is better, We'll discuss your inappropriate behavior. He's not going to get better without proper treatment, I said to her, retreating back. He needs a kidney transplant. Vanessa stiffened momentarily, then continued without responding. I returned to the office, gathering Michael's medical documents and journal. Whatever was happening here, I needed evidence. When Vanessa emerged from the bedroom 30 minutes later, dressed in elegant but subdued clothing suitable for a hospital visit, I was sitting calmly in the living room. I'm heading to the hospital now, she announced. Are you coming? I'll be along shortly, I replied. I'm waiting for a call from Dr. Chen about being tested as a potential kidney donor for Michael. Vanessa's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. You're, well, not exactly young. Surely there are better options. Family members are often the best matches, I said. As his wife, you'd be a candidate too. Of course. A flicker of something, alarmed disgust, crossed her face. I'm not compatible. We already checked. It was the first straight answer she'd given, and it rang true. But something about her quick response raised my suspicions. When did you check? I asked. When he was first diagnosed, of course, she replied, gathering her purse. Months ago. That's strange, I said, watching her carefully. Because Dr. Chen said they're still waiting for you to authorize release of his complete medical records. How could they have tested your compatibility without those records? Vanessa's composure slipped again. You're twisting my words. We discussed it theoretically. The doctor mentioned rare blood types or something. She headed for the door. This conversation is pointless. I'm going to see my husband. After she left, I sat in the silent apartment, pieces of the puzzle slowly assembling in my mind. Vanessa had known about Michael's condition for months. She'd filled his prescriptions, but apparently hadn't ensured he took them. She'd discouraged proper medical treatment in favor of natural approaches. And now she was barely visiting him in the hospital, while lying about her whereabouts. Why? What could she possibly gain from Michael's illness? My phone rang, a Chicago area code I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Stewart, this is Thomas from the front desk at Mr. Stewart's building. I hope I'm not overstepping, but I thought you should know. Mrs. Stewart just left in quite a hurry. She had luggage with her. My blood ran cold. Luggage, are you certain? Yes, ma'am. A large suitcase and a carry-on. She got into a taxi heading toward the airport, not the hospital. I thanked him for the information, my mind racing. Vanessa was running. But why now? What had spooked her? My arrival, the mention of medical records, the possibility of being tested as a donor, whatever her reasons. I couldn't let her disappear. Not when Michael's life was at stake and so many questions remained unanswered. I called Dr. Chen. I found Michael's medications, I told her. They've barely been touched, despite being filled regularly, and his wife just left their apartment with luggage, heading for the airport, not the hospital. Dr. Chen was silent for a moment. Mrs. Stewart, I need to be very careful what I say here, but given your medical background, I can tell you that we found some concerning substances in Michael's blood work, compounds that shouldn't be there and could potentially accelerate kidney damage. The implication was clear and horrifying. You think someone was poisoning him? I'm saying we've notified hospital security and are considering whether to contact the police. Dr. Chen replied carefully, if you have reason to believe Mrs. Stewart is fleeing. I do, I said firmly. And I found Michael's medical journal. He's been documenting his symptoms for months, and Vanessa's responses to them. It looks like she actively discouraged proper treatment. That would be valuable evidence. Can you bring it to the hospital? And Mrs. Stewart, be careful. If your suspicions are correct, you could be dealing with someone dangerous. I assured her I would be cautious, ended the call, and immediately dialed another number, that of Andrew Blackwell, a former military colleague who had become an attorney in Chicago. If Vanessa was fleeing with ill-gotten gains, or worse, deliberately harming my son, I needed legal help to stop her. Andrew answered on the second ring. After a brief explanation of the situation, he promised to meet me at the hospital and bring the necessary paperwork for emergency conservatorship. If your son is incapacitated and his wife is abandoning him, or worse, we can get the courts to give you temporary control of his medical decisions and finances. He explained. Bring all the evidence you found. Before leaving the apartment, I did one last sweep, gathering Michael's journal, medical documents, and financial statements I'd found in his desk. As I was about to leave, I noticed something odd, a business card tucked into the frame of the wedding photo on the dresser. It was for a luxury real estate agent in the Cayman Islands, with a handwritten note on the back, all set for next week. Wire came through. V. I photographed the card with my phone, then slipped it into my pocket. The picture was becoming clearer, and it was uglier than I'd imagined. Vanessa hadn't just neglected Michael. She appeared to be actively planning her escape while he was ill, possibly after transferring their assets offshore. As I headed for the door, a knock startled me, opening it cautiously. I found an elderly woman in a silk robe standing in the hallway. "Excuse me," she said, peering at me with sharp eyes behind designer glasses. "I live next door. I heard voices and thought Michael might be home from the hospital. I'm Michael's mother, Barbara," I introduced myself. "Michael is still in the ICU. "Margaret Patterson," she replied, extending a thin hand. "Such a terrible thing. I was the one who found him, in the hallway outside, barely conscious. If I hadn't gone out for my newspaper that morning." "You called the ambulance?" I asked, suddenly realizing this was the neighbor mentioned by Dr. Chen. "You saved his life. Thank you." Mrs. Patterson waved away my thanks. "Michael is a dear boy, always helps me with my groceries, fixes things around my apartment, not like that wife of his." Her voice dropped disapprovingly. "The parties she would have when he was working late, the men coming and going, and these past few months, when the poor boy was so obviously ill, she was never home. I tried to help, brought soup, checked on him when I could, but she caught herself. I'm sorry. I shouldn't speak ill of her to you." "No, please," I urged. "I need to understand what's been happening. Michael's life depends on it." Mrs. Patterson glanced up and down the empty hallway, then lowered her voice. 2 weeks ago, I heard them arguing. She was shouting that he was ruining everything with his inconvenient illness, said something about a deadline and plans she wouldn't let him destroy. The elderly woman's eyes flashed with indignation. The next day, he looked worse than ever. That's when I started checking on him daily. And then, 3 days ago, I found him in the hall. I thanked her for the information, promised to keep her updated on Michael's condition, and headed for the elevator with a renewed sense of urgency. Mrs. Patterson's account confirmed my suspicions and added a chilling new dimension. Vanessa hadn't just been neglectful. She'd been actively angry about Michael's illness interfering with some plan. Combined with the Cayman Islands real estate card, the picture was becoming alarmingly clear, but I still didn't understand why Vanessa would marry Michael, only to harm him. My son was successful, yes, but not wealthy enough to explain this level of calculation. Unless there was something I didn't know about my son's finances. At the hospital, Andrew was waiting, his imposing frame and military bearing making him stand out in the ICU waiting room. At 65, my former colleague was still fit, his dark skin contrasting with his silver hair. "Barbara," he greeted me with a brief hug. "I've started the paperwork for emergency conservatorship. How's Michael?" "Critical but stable," I replied. "Have you seen Vanessa?" "No sign of her. I checked with the nurses. She hasn't been in." He guided me to a quiet corner. "Tell me everything you've found." I shared the evidence, the unfilled prescriptions, Michael's journal entries, Mrs. Patterson's account of arguments and strange men visiting the apartment, and the Cayman Islands real estate card. Andrew listened intently, taking notes and occasionally asking for clarification. "This is deeply concerning," he said when I finished. "It sounds like Vanessa may have been planning to empty your son's accounts and flee while he was incapacitated. Or worse. Have you checked his finances, life insurance policies?" "Not yet. I've been focused on his medical condition." Andrew nodded. "Understandable, but we should look into it immediately. If she's draining accounts or has taken out policies on him." The implication hung in the air between us. If Vanessa stood to gain financially from Michael's death, his mysterious acceleration of kidney disease took on an even darker meaning. "I need access to his accounts," I said, "and we need to stop her from leaving the country if she hasn't already." The conservatorship will help with the accounts, Andrew assured me. As for stopping her, without formal charges, it's difficult, but I have contacts in law enforcement who might be willing to question her based on the medical evidence and her apparent flight. A nurse appeared, interrupting our conversation. Mrs. Stewart, your son is asking for you. He's awake and more lucid than he's been since admission. I hurried to Michael's room, Andrew following at a discreet distance. My son was indeed awake, his eyes clearer than they had been that morning. The dialysis seemed to be temporarily improving his condition, though I knew it was just buying time. "Mom," he said, his voice stronger. "You're still here." "Of course I am," I replied, taking his hand. "I'm not going anywhere." He looked past me, scanning the room. "Vanessa," I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal in his fragile state. "She's not here right now. Sweetheart, Michael, I need to ask you something important. Do you have a power of attorney document? Anyone you've authorized to make decisions for you if you can't?" Confusion crossed his face. I think so. When Vanessa and I got married, we set up all the legal stuff. She has power of attorney. I think. And I have one for her." He frowned. "Why, what's wrong?" I exchanged glances with Andrew, who had entered the room quietly. "Michael," I said gently, "I'm concerned about some things I've found at your apartment. Your medications haven't been taken properly. There are financial documents that suggest money being moved offshore. And Vanessa—" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Vanessa doesn't seem to be prioritizing your health." Michael's face clouded. "She said the medications were making me worse, that the doctors were pushing unnecessary treatments." His voice strengthened with a hint of his old determination. "But I knew something was wrong. Last week, I found papers, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. When I confronted her, she said it was for our future, for a surprise property she was buying us." Andrew stepped forward. "Michael, I'm Andrew Blackwell, an old friend of your mother's and an attorney. Given what we're discovering, we think it might be wise to grant your mother temporary conservatorship, authority to make medical and financial decisions while you're incapacitated. It would only be temporary." Michael closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, I saw pain there, not just physical, but the deeper anguish of betrayal. "She's not coming back, is she?" "I don't think so, son," I admitted softly. "She was seen leaving your apartment with luggage, heading toward the airport, not the hospital." A single tear slid down his hollow cheek. "I loved her, Mom. I really did." "I know, sweetheart." I squeezed his hand. "I'm so sorry." He took a shuddering breath. "Do what you need to do. The power of attorney document. It's in my home office, in the safe behind the blueprint of the Guggenheim. Combination is Dad's birthday." Andrew nodded and slipped out, presumably to retrieve the document. I stayed with Michael, gently urging him to tell me everything he could remember about his illness, his treatment, and Vanessa's behavior. His account was fragmented, clouded by both the toxins in his system and, I suspected, deliberate deception from his wife. "She would bring me these health drinks," he recalled. "Said they'd help my kidneys." Tasted terrible. After I started them, I felt worse. But she said that was normal, that I was detoxifying. "Did you ever have the drinks analyzed?" I asked. He shook his head weakly. "Why would I?" "She was my wife. I trusted her." Each new revelation heightened my sense of urgency and dread. By the time Dr. Chen arrived for evening rounds, I was convinced that Vanessa had been systematically poisoning my son while simultaneously draining his accounts. "We've identified the compound in Michael's bloodstream," Dr. Chen told me privately after examining him. "It's a substance that can cause or accelerate kidney damage. Not something found in normal food or drink." "Have you contacted the police?" I asked. She nodded. "They're sending someone to take statements. And Mrs. Stewart? We've started the process to see if you're a compatible kidney donor. Initial blood tests look promising, but we'll need more comprehensive matching." A faint hope kindled in my chest. I could save my son, not just by exposing Vanessa's crimes, but by giving him a part of myself. It felt right. a chance to make up for all the times I hadn't been there. Andrew returned as night was falling, bearing both the power of attorney document and alarming news. The original power of attorney has been altered, he informed me grimly. The version in Michael's safe grants Vanessa extensive powers, including the ability to sell property and make major financial decisions without consultation. But there are signs of tampering, different ink, slight differences in handwriting on key passages. She forged changes to the document, I asked, appalled. It appears so. And I found something else. He handed me a folder. Your son has a substantial trust fund from his father's side of the family. Did you know about this? I stared at the document, stunned. No. Robert's parents died before Michael was born. There was never any mention of a trust. Well, it exists, and it's significant, over $2 million, to be accessed when Michael turned 35 or in case of medical emergency. Andrew's expression was grave. He turns 35 next month, and paperwork was filed 2 weeks ago to access the funds based on medical necessity. The money was transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands 3 days ago, right before Michael collapsed. The pieces clicked into terrible place. Vanessa hadn't married Michael for his architect's salary. She'd married him for a trust fund he might not even have known existed, and when the timetable for accessing it naturally wasn't fast enough, she'd accelerated his illness to trigger the medical emergency clause. We need to freeze that account, I said urgently, and find Vanessa before she disappears completely. I've already filed emergency motions with the court, Andrew assured me, and I've contacted Detective James Morales, a friend who specializes in financial crimes. He's meeting us downstairs in 20 minutes. I hesitated, looking back at my sleeping son. I don't want to leave him alone. I've arranged for a private nurse to sit with him, Andrew assured me. Someone I trust. No one will get near him without proper authorization. The implication hung between us. We both feared Vanessa might return to finish what she'd started if she discovered her plan was unraveling. I nodded gratefully and followed Andrew to the elevator. Detective Morales was waiting in a small consultation room off the main lobby. He was a compact man with sharp eyes and the alert posture of someone who missed nothing. After introductions, I laid out everything we'd discovered: the unfilled prescriptions, the journal entries, the mysterious health drinks, the altered power of attorney, and the recently drained trust fund. This fits a pattern we've been seeing, Morales said, making notes as I spoke. Wealthy individuals with health issues married to much younger spouses who suddenly get worse under their care. We've had 3 similar cases in the last 2 years, but we've never been able to gather enough evidence for prosecution. You think Vanessa is connected to these other cases? I asked. Morales tapped his pen thoughtfully. I can't say for certain without running her information through our database, but the methodology is similar. The victim is isolated from family, medical treatment is sabotaged, financial accounts are drained, and the spouse disappears shortly before death would raise too many questions. The clinical way he described what had happened to my son made my blood run cold. You're saying she's done this before? It's possible, Morales confirmed. These operations are often sophisticated, with multiple players. The spouse is just the front person, while others handle the financial arrangements, document forgery, and so on. He looked up from his notes. Did your son have life insurance? I hadn't even thought to check. I don't know. We should find out, Andrew said. If he does, and Vanessa is the beneficiary, she would have a strong financial incentive for his death, Morales finished. Mrs. Stewart, I'd like to place an officer outside your son's room, just as a precaution, and I'll need your permission to access his financial records. Of course. I agreed immediately. Whatever you need, Morales stood. I'll also put out an alert for Vanessa Stewart at airports and border crossings. If she's still in the country, we'll find her. As the detective left to make arrangements, Andrew placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. You should get some rest. Barbara, you've been going non-stop since that early morning call. I shook my head. Not yet. I need to go back to Michael's apartment. See what else I can find. There might be more evidence there. Andrew knew better than to argue with me. Instead, he simply said, I'm coming with you. Back at Michael's apartment, with Andrew's help, I conducted a more thorough search. In the home office, We found bank statements showing regular large withdrawals over the past 6 months. In the bedroom closet, hidden in a shoebox among Vanessa's designer footwear, we discovered a passport in the name of Vanessa Collins, her maiden name with recent stamps from the Cayman Islands. But the most damning evidence was in the kitchen. Behind the expensive coffee maker were several unmarked bottles containing a greenish liquid. I carefully photographed them without touching them, then called Detective Morales. "We found what might be the substance she was using to poison him," I reported. "Unmarked bottles in the kitchen, matching Michael's description of the health drinks she made him." "Don't touch them," Morales warned. "I'll send a team to collect them for analysis, while waiting for the police." I continued searching, driven by a mother's determination to understand what had happened to her child. In the guest bathroom, tucked behind extra towels in the linen closet, I found a burner phone. Andrew, who had been checking Michael's home computer, called me over excitedly. "Barbara, look at this," he said, pointing to the screen. Michael had installed home security cameras 6 months ago. The footage is stored in cloud backup. My heart raced as Andrew navigated through the files, searching recent dates. "There," I said, pointing to a folder labeled with a date 3 days ago, the day Michael collapsed. The footage showed Michael alone in the apartment, clearly ill, struggling to move from the couch to the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of water with shaking hands, then reached for his phone. The camera angle didn't show who he was calling, but the conversation was brief. Moments later, he staggered toward the front door and out of frame. "That must be when he collapsed in the hallway," I said quietly, picturing my son falling, alone and desperate for help. Andrew scrolled back through earlier footage. There was Vanessa, preparing one of the green drinks in the kitchen, adding something from a small vial when Michael wasn't looking. There she was again, meeting with an unfamiliar man in the apartment while Michael was presumably at work. And most damning of all, footage from 2 weeks ago showing Vanessa at Michael's desk, carefully altering documents with what appeared to be his signature. "This is the evidence we need," Andrew said, quickly copying the files to a secure drive. "With this, the police can arrest her for attempted murder and fraud." When Detective Morales arrived with his team, we showed him our discoveries. His professionally neutral expression couldn't entirely hide his shock at the video evidence. "This is exceptionally clear proof," he admitted. "Most cases like this are circumstantial at best. You've given us enough for an airtight case if we can find her." "What do you mean, if?" I demanded. "You put out an alert," Morales sighed. "We did, but according to immigration records, Vanessa Stewart boarded a private charter flight to Grand Cayman 3 hours ago. The Cayman Islands have limited extradition with the UN, especially for financial crimes." My stomach dropped. "She's going to get away with it." "Not necessarily," Morales countered. "This goes beyond financial crime. With evidence of attempted murder, we have stronger grounds for extradition, and we can freeze the accounts she's set up there through international banking cooperation." He looked at me steadily. "It won't be quick or easy, Mrs. Stewart, but we will find her, and she will face justice." It was small comfort. Justice might eventually be served, but my immediate concern was Michael. After the police left with their evidence, including the mysterious green liquid, I returned to the hospital with Andrew, exhaustion finally catching up with me. The private nurse Andrew had hired, a no-nonsense former military medic named Sarah, reported that Michael had been stable, with no visitors attempting to enter his room. The uniformed police officer outside nodded in confirmation. "Dr. Chen stopped by," Sarah added. "She said the initial cross-match tests for kidney donation look promising. They want to run more comprehensive tests tomorrow." I sank into the chair beside Michael's bed, relief washing over me. I could potentially save my son's life with my kidney, a chance to literally give him part of myself to make up for all the times I hadn't been there. Andrew insisted on getting me a hotel room near the hospital, but I refused to leave Michael. Instead, I dozed in the recliner beside his bed, waking at every change in his breathing or beep of the monitors. Military nursing had taught me to sleep lightly in dangerous situations, and though the hospital was secure, the threat Vanessa posed still felt very real. Morning brought Dr. Chen with cautiously positive news. The dialysis is helping temporarily, and your cross-match tests continue to look promising for donation. We've scheduled the full workup for today if you're still willing. Of course, I said without hesitation. What are the chances I'll be a match? As his mother, better than average, about 50%, but we won't know for certain until we complete all the tests. She hesitated. There's something else. The police shared the results of the substance analysis from your son's apartment. It contained ethylene glycol antifreeze in small but significant amounts, mixed with herbal ingredients that would mask the taste. Horror washed over me. She was deliberately poisoning him. It appears so. In small doses over time, ethylene glycol causes kidney damage that mimics other conditions. It would accelerate the progression of his existing kidney disease without raising immediate alarms. The calculated cruelty of it staggered me. To deliberately poison someone day after day, watching them deteriorate while pretending to care for them, what kind of monster was Vanessa Michael woke as Dr. Chen was leaving? His eyes were clearer today, though dark circles beneath them testified to his ongoing struggle. "Mom," he said, voice raspy but stronger than yesterday. "You're still here." "Always," I promised, taking his hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck." He attempted a smile. "But better than yesterday." "They told me you're being tested as a donor." I nodded. "The initial results look good. We'll know more today." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "After everything, all the times I didn't call when I should have, all the holidays I missed because Vanessa wanted to go somewhere else." "Shh," I soothed, squeezing his hand. "None of that matters now." "It does," he insisted. "I let her come between us. I believed her when she said you were too controlling, too old-fashioned. I should have seen what she was doing." "She fooled a lot of people," I assured him. "Professional con artists are good at what they do, and I suspect Vanessa is very professional." A shadow crossed his face at the mention of her name. "The police were here earlier. They showed me some of the footage from our apartment." His voice broke. "She was poisoning me. Mom, for money. I thought she loved me." The raw pain in his voice broke my heart. I had no adequate words of comfort, so I simply held his hand as he wept for the betrayal, for the lost years, for the future he had imagined with someone who had never existed except as a carefully crafted facade. When he had composed himself, Michael fixed me with a determined look that reminded me of his father. "I want to help catch her, whatever it takes. The police are doing everything they can," I assured him. "Detective Morales seems very competent." "Not just the police," Michael said. "I have resources, too. Friends in international banking. The trust fund she stole, I knew about it, but I never touched it. It was for our future children's education, for retirement. I have contacts at the bank that manages it." I hadn't realized Michael was aware of the trust. "You never mentioned it." "It didn't seem important," he said simply. "Money never was. To me. That's why I didn't notice what Vanessa was doing with our accounts at first. I trusted her completely." Another nurse entered to check Michael's vitals, and I stepped out to give Andrew an update. He was speaking with Detective Morales in the hallway, their expressions grim. "What's happened?" I asked, immediately alert. "We traced the burner phone we found in Michael's apartment," Morales explained. "The call logs show regular contact with a number in Toronto associated with a man named Victor Collins. Collins, Vanessa's maiden name." I realized. Morales nodded. "We think he's her brother, possibly her accomplice. Canadian authorities are looking into him now. The concerning thing is that there were 3 calls from this number to the burner phone yesterday, after Vanessa had already fled. The implication was clear. Vanessa might have accomplices still in Chicago, people who could potentially harm Michael if her plan was threatened. "We've increased security," Andrew assured me, noting my alarm. 2 officers now, and the hospital has been alerted to restrict visitors. "I should be with him," I said, turning back toward Michael's room. "One more thing," Morales added. "We found evidence that Vanessa was involved in at least one previous case, an older man in Boston who died of apparent heart failure 2 years ago. She was using the name Vanessa Parker then. His accounts were emptied just before his death. The scope of Vanessa's crimes was wider than I had imagined. She wasn't just an opportunistic thief. She was a serial predator who had moved from victim to victim, leaving destruction in her wake. I spent the rest of the morning undergoing tests for kidney donation, my mind racing with all we had discovered. The hospital staff worked efficiently, drawing blood, conducting tissue typing, checking my kidney function and overall health. As a retired military nurse, I knew the process well, but experiencing it as a potential donor rather than a medical professional gave me a new perspective. "You're in excellent health for your age," remarked the transplant coordinator, a brisk woman named Dr. Harrison. "Military fitness standards served you well." "Will that improve Michael's chances?" I asked. "It certainly doesn't hurt. The healthier the donor kidney, the better the outcome generally is for the recipient." She reviewed my chart. "We should have final results by tomorrow morning. If you're a match and preliminary tests suggest you are, we could schedule surgery within days. Your son's condition is deteriorating despite dialysis." The urgency in her voice confirmed what I had observed myself. Despite the temporary improvements from dialysis, Michael was losing ground. His body was fighting a battle on multiple fronts: the original kidney disease, the damage from Vanessa's poisoning, and the overall strain of toxin buildup in his system. When I returned to Michael's room, I found him on his laptop, working intently despite his obvious fatigue. Andrew sat nearby, on the phone with what sounded like banking officials. "What are you doing?" I asked, concerned that he was overexerting himself. "Fighting back," Michael replied without looking up. "I'm tracking the money. Vanessa was smart, but not as smart as she thought. The trust fund transfers leave electronic fingerprints." Andrew ended his call and joined us. "Michael's contacts at the trust management firm are cooperating fully. They've identified the receiving account in the Caymans and are working with authorities there to freeze it." "Will that be enough to catch her?" I asked. "It might force her to surface," Michael said, closing his laptop with visible effort. "If she can't access the money, she'll have to make another move. And when she does—" He didn't finish the sentence, exhaustion overtaking him. I gently took the laptop and helped him lie back against the pillows. "Rest now. You need your strength." As evening approached, Dr. Mei Chen returned with updated test results. "The cross-matching is complete," she told us. "Mrs. Stewart, you are indeed a compatible donor for your son. There are still some final tests to conduct, but we can tentatively schedule the transplant for the day after tomorrow." The news brought the first real hope since this nightmare began. I could save my son, whatever happened with Vanessa and her accomplices. Whatever justice might or might not be served, Michael would have a chance at life. Detective Morales arrived as Dr. Chen was leaving, bringing both good and concerning news. "We've made progress tracking Vanessa," he reported. "She landed in Grand Cayman as expected, but left on another private charter shortly thereafter. We believe she's heading to a non-extradition country, possibly in Southeast Asia or Eastern Europe." "So she is getting away," I said bitterly. "Not necessarily," Morales countered. "International banking authorities have frozen the account where the trust money was transferred. She can't access it. And we've identified 2 accomplices still in Chicago, both with connections to Victor Collins in Toronto. We're conducting surveillance on them now." "Do they pose a threat to Michael?" I asked, the protective instinct that had driven me through military service and motherhood flaring sharply. "We don't think so. Now that they know we're onto them, they appear to be the financial end of the operation, not the medical aspect." His careful phrasing didn't disguise the ugly truth, not the poisoners. That night, I refused to leave Michael's side despite Andrew's insistence that I needed proper rest before the upcoming transplant surgery. The hospital provided a cot, but I spent most of the night watching my son sleep, memorizing the face that had changed from the little boy I remembered to this grown man who had suffered so much. I thought about the years I'd missed deployments that had taken me away from school plays and baseball games, holidays spent in military hospitals overseas rather than at home. I had always believed I was serving a greater good, protecting not just my country, but my son's future by extension. Now, facing the possibility of losing him, I wondered if those choices had been worth it. Morning brought a flurry of pre-surgical preparations. Final tests confirmed my kidney was suitable for donation, and the transplant was scheduled for 8 a.m. the next day. Dr. Chen reviewed the risks and procedures with both of us, though as a former nurse, much of it was familiar to me. The surgery carries standard risks for both donor and recipient, she explained. But Michael's condition adds additional complications. The damage to his kidneys is extensive, and there may be unforeseen effects from the substances he was exposed to. You mean the poison, Michael said flatly. He had insisted on complete honesty from his medical team, refusing to soften the reality of what Vanessa had done to him. Dr. Chen nodded. Yes, ethylene glycol causes damage that may affect how your body responds to the transplanted kidney. We'll monitor you extremely closely and adjust anti-rejection medications as needed. After she left, Michael turned to me with concern in his eyes. Mom, are you sure about this kidney donation isn't without risks, especially at your age? I've never been more sure of anything, I told him firmly. Besides, military fitness standards. Remember, I'm in better shape than most people 20 years younger. He smiled weakly. Always the tough Marine nurse. Navy, I corrected automatically, our old family joke. My husband had been Marines, I had been Navy, and the good-natured rivalry had continued even after his death. For a moment, we were simply mother and son again, the shadow of Vanessa's betrayal temporarily pushed aside by this small moment of normal family banter. The moment was shattered by Andrew bursting into the room, his normally composed demeanor visibly shaken. What's wrong? I asked, immediately alert. Vanessa's been located, he said, catching his breath. In Singapore, but that's not all. Detective Morales just called. They've been monitoring communications between her accomplices here and overseas. There's a plan to... He glanced at Michael, clearly reluctant to continue. To what? Michael pressed. Andrew's voice dropped. To ensure you don't survive the transplant. They have someone inside the hospital. Cold fear gripped me. Inside who? They don't know yet, but there's been communication about tampering with post-surgical medications or procedures. Andrew turned to me. Morales wants to postpone the surgery until they can identify the insider. No, Michael said firmly, surprising both of us. We're not postponing. Mom's tests show I'm already in critical condition. Every day we wait reduces my chances. But if there's someone here who means to harm you, I began. Then we'll just have to outsmart them, Michael interrupted. His face, though pale and drawn, showed the determination that had helped him excel in architecture, the ability to see problems from multiple angles and find unexpected solutions. What are you suggesting? Andrew asked. We let them think they're succeeding, Michael said. We stage the surgery, leak information that there are complications, make them believe their plan is working. Meanwhile, the real surgery happens somewhere else. Andrew looked skeptical. That's extremely complex to coordinate, and risky. So is waiting while my kidneys continue to fail, Michael countered. Call Morales. See if it's possible. To my surprise, Detective Morales was intrigued by the idea when Andrew reached him. After a lengthy conference call that included Dr. Chen and hospital security, a plan began to take shape. The scheduled surgery would be announced to proceed as planned, but Michael would be secretly transferred to Northwestern's sister hospital in Evanston overnight. The transplant would take place there with a hand-picked medical team sworn to secrecy. Meanwhile, a mock procedure would appear to take place at Northwestern, with strategic complications leaked to flush out the insider. It's like something from a spy novel, I remarked as preparations were made. I'm not sure whether to be impressed or terrified. A bit of both, Michael admitted. But it's our best chance. And honestly, Mom, after what Vanessa did, I need to take back some control. I understood, having been manipulated and betrayed so completely. Michael needed to be an active participant in his own rescue, not just a passive victim. It was the same resilience I'd seen in wounded soldiers who fought hardest for recovery when given agency in their treatment. Late that night, with hospital corridors dimmed and visitor traffic minimal, Michael was carefully transferred to an ambulance waiting at a service entrance. I accompanied him, along with Dr. Chen and 2 trusted nurses. Detective Morales provided an unmarked police escort. The entire operation was conducted with military precision, something I deeply appreciated. Evanston Hospital had prepared a secure wing for us, with restricted access and additional security. As Michael was settled into his new room, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time since receiving that early morning call, I believed we might actually make it through this nightmare. Try to rest, Dr. Chen advised both of us. Tomorrow is a big day. But sleep proved elusive. I sat by Michael's window, watching the lights of Chicago glimmer in the distance, thinking about how quickly life could change. One moment, I had been planning my retirement, considering travel, perhaps volunteer work, maybe finally writing that nursing textbook I'd always thought about. Now, I was in a hospital security wing, preparing to donate a kidney to my son who had nearly been murdered by his wife. "Mom?" Michael's voice came softly from the bed. "Are you still awake?" "Yes, sweetheart. I've been thinking about when this is over." He shifted to see me better in the dim light. "I don't think I can stay in Chicago. Too many memories. You could come to San Diego," I suggested, trying to keep my tone casual. "The weather's better for recovery, and I have plenty of space." I had purchased a modest 2-bedroom condo upon retirement, nothing fancy but comfortable and near the ocean. "I'd like that," he said, surprising me. Michael had always been fiercely independent, determined to make his own way. "Just for a while, during recovery, if that's okay." "It's more than okay," I assured him, warmth spreading through my chest. For all the horror of the situation, it might bring us closer again. Give us back some of the time we'd lost. Morning came too quickly, with pre-surgical preparations beginning at dawn. As medical staff prepared us for the operations that would occur simultaneously, Michael's failing kidneys removed and mine transplanted, I felt strangely calm. This was something tangible I could do for my son, a direct way to help that required no complex investigations or legal maneuverings. "I'll see you on the other side," I told Michael as they prepared to wheel him to the operating room. "Love you, Mom," he replied, reaching for my hand one last time. "Love you too, son. Always have, always will." As the anesthesia took effect, my last conscious thought was a fierce, primal determination Vanessa had failed. My son would live, and somehow, someday, she would pay for what she had done. I woke in recovery several hours later, groggy but alert enough to immediately ask, "Michael, how is he?" The recovery nurse smiled reassuringly. "The surgery went well. Your kidney is functioning in his body. He's still in post-op, but Dr. Chen says everything looks promising so far." Relief washed over me, followed by the dull ache of surgical pain as the anesthesia continued to wear off. A small price to pay for my son's life. Andrew appeared by my bedside once I was transferred to a regular room. "You did it," he said, squeezing my hand gently. "And there's more good news. The fake surgery ruse worked. They caught the insider, a pharmacy technician who was supposed to tamper with Michael's anti-rejection medications. He's cooperating with police now, giving them information on the entire operation." "And Vanessa?" I asked. "Still in Singapore, but the net is closing. With what they've learned from the technician, they have enough to request international cooperation for her arrest. It may take time, but she won't escape justice." I nodded, too exhausted for the surge of vindication I might have expected. Right now, all that mattered was that Michael was safe and healing. Later that day, once I was strong enough to sit in a wheelchair, nurses brought me to Michael's room in the ICU. He was still heavily sedated, but the monitors showed strong vital signs and, most importantly, improving kidney function. I reached for his hand, this grown man who would always be my little boy, and felt it gently squeeze mine in return. His eyes fluttered open briefly. "We did it," I whispered. His mouth curved in a slight smile before he drifted back to sleep. In that moment, I realized that whatever happened with Vanessa, whether justice came quickly or slowly, whether the money was recovered or lost, we had already won the most important battle. My son would live. We would rebuild, and no one would ever come between us again. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. The recovery process was slower than I had hoped, but steadier than the doctors had feared. For 5 days after the transplant, Michael remained in intensive care. his body adjusting to my kidney while fighting off the lingering effects of both his disease and Vanessa's poisoning. I recovered more quickly, refusing to stay confined to my bed after the second day, despite the surgical team's protests. "Mrs. Stewart, you need to rest," Dr. Chen admonished when she found me sitting in Michael's room rather than my own. "I've endured worse during my career," I replied, not taking my eyes off my son's sleeping form. "In Afghanistan, I was treating patients 12 hours after taking shrapnel in my shoulder." Dr. Chen sighed, recognizing the futility of arguing with a military nurse about proper recovery protocols. "At least use the wheelchair when you come here," she conceded. "Your body needs to heal, too." I agreed to this compromise, though the moment she left, I rolled the wheelchair into a corner and resumed my vigilant post in the more comfortable visitor's chair. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Saving my strength for Michael's recovery was more important than adhering to hospital rules. On the 6th day, Michael was moved to a regular room, and I was discharged with instructions to rest and avoid lifting anything heavier than 5 pounds. We were reunited in Michael's new room, both of us bruised and sore, but with the worst behind us. "The doctors say your kidney is performing beautifully," Michael told me, color returning to his face for the first time in weeks. "Apparently, I have the kidneys of a much younger woman," I smiled, pleased by his attempt at humor. "Military fitness. I told you it would pay off someday." We settled into a careful routine. I stayed at a nearby hotel but spent most waking hours at Michael's bedside. Andrew visited daily, bringing updates on the legal proceedings against Vanessa and her network. Detective Morales came less frequently, but with increasingly promising news. "The pharmacy technician has given us detailed information about the operation," he reported during one visit. "It appears Vanessa, or whatever her real name is, was part of a sophisticated ring targeting wealthy individuals across the country. They identify victims with health issues and significant assets, then insert an operative usually as a romantic interest." "How many victims have there been?" I asked, dreading the answer. "We've identified 8 cases so far, spanning the last 5 years. 4 of the victims died before the scheme was discovered. 3 were left financially ruined but survived. And then there's Michael, the first case where we've caught them in action." Michael, propped up in his hospital bed, absorbed this information with a gravity that reminded me of his father. "Were all the victims men? Most but not all," Morales replied. 2 were wealthy older women who became involved with much younger men. The methodology was identical isolation from family, medical sabotage, financial drainage. "And Vanessa," I pressed. "Any progress on finding her? Significant progress," Morales confirmed, his professional demeanor brightening. "Singaporean authorities located her at a luxury hotel, but she fled before they could apprehend her. However, she left behind documents and electronics that have given us valuable intelligence. We believe she's attempting to reach a contact in Thailand, and international agencies have been alerted." It was encouraging but not definitive. I wanted Vanessa in custody, facing justice for what she had done not just to Michael, but to all her victims. The thought of her living in luxury somewhere, spending stolen money while families grieved, was intolerable. "What about the money?" Andrew asked, the practical attorney emerging. "Any progress recovering Michael's trust fund?" "Partial success," Morales said. "About 40% has been frozen in Cayman accounts. The rest was moved through a series of shell companies and is proving more difficult to trace. But with international banking authorities now involved, we're optimistic about recovering more." It wasn't perfect justice, but it was progress. More importantly, Michael was healing not just physically, but emotionally as well. The betrayal had cut deep, but as days passed, I saw glimpses of the determined, thoughtful son I remembered. 2 weeks after the transplant, Dr. Chen declared Michael ready for discharge with strict outpatient follow-up. "The kidney is functioning well, and your body is accepting it with minimal rejection issues," she told him during morning rounds. "You'll need to continue anti-rejection medications indefinitely and follow up regularly, but you can continue your recovery at home." Michael and I exchanged glances. His apartment, the scene of Vanessa's betrayal and poisoning, was the last place either of us wanted to return to. "Actually," Michael said, I'll be going to San Diego with my mother for the recovery period. We've already made arrangements. This was news to me, but I nodded as if we'd discussed it thoroughly. In truth, I had mentioned the possibility once, but we hadn't made firm plans. Still, nothing could have made me happier than having Michael come home with me. That's an excellent idea, Dr. Chen approved. A change of environment will be good for your mental recovery as well as physical. I'll coordinate with a nephrologist in San Diego for your follow-up care. Later, when we were alone, I asked Michael about his sudden decision. Are you sure about San Diego? What about your job? Your apartment? I've been thinking about it a lot, he said, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. I can't stay in Chicago, Mom. Not after what happened. I submitted my resignation to the firm yesterday. They were very understanding given the circumstances. As for the apartment, he grimaced. Andrew is handling the sale. I never want to set foot in that place again. But your career, you've worked so hard to establish yourself here, I pointed out, though secretly delighted at the prospect of having him near me. Michael looked out the window thoughtfully. I can work anywhere. Several California firms have already reached out after hearing what happened. Apparently being the victim of an international poisoning scheme makes the architectural news. His attempt at dark humor didn't quite mask the pain beneath. Besides, I need a fresh start. And he hesitated. I think we both could use some time together. Make up for the years we missed. I reached for his hand, too moved to speak immediately. After all the military deployments, the missed holidays, the geographical distance we'd maintained for years, we were being given another chance. The circumstances were horrific, but the opportunity was precious. Your old room is waiting for you, I said finally. Though I should warn you, it's a guest room now. No posters of rock bands or architectural wonders on the walls anymore. I think I can live with that. He smiled. The discharge process took most of the day, with final tests, medication schedules, and travel clearances to arrange. Detective Morales stopped by as we were preparing to leave. I wanted to update you before you depart, he said. There's been a significant development. Vanessa has been apprehended by authorities in Bangkok. She was attempting to board a flight to a non-extradition country. The news landed like a physical shock.